Wayne firmly refused Grinahay's offer to have a room prepared for him, leaving the mansion with his guards. His destination was the town inn. When nobles went out on excursions, it wasn't as if they could leave with nothing but the clothes on their backs. They had to choose guards and attendants to care for them, prepare funds and supplies that would need to be brought for the trip, and carefully select the route to their destination and plan out any rest stops. Only then would they depart. Grinahay had insisted he needed a few days of preparation, but Wayne shook his head. Didn't I tell you? The princess is aware of everything. After all, Grinahay had been on the verge of invading Natra, which meant he had everything in place to leave at a moment's notice. And when Wayne made a comment of her omniscience, Grinahay completely retracted his statement, announcing he'd be done the very next day. Grinahay had few reasons why he wanted to buy himself time. 1, because he never knew when to give up. 2, because he needed to mentally prepare for their meeting. And 3, "Your Highness," called out Rackham, one of Wayne's guards, suddenly, from next to him. Yeah, I know. The town was filled with an eerie silence, even though it was the middle of the day. They had heard that the people had locked themselves away as a result of the debauchery of the station soldiers. They were disgusted by Grinahay's hands-off attitude, but this is different. The general atmosphere had changed from when they first entered the town. Someone was intentionally driving the people away. Wayne had an inherently perceptive eye to see this, as did Rackham, with his natural intuition. Can we evade it? No, I sensed them from behind and in front of us. They've boxed us in. As he calmly walked along the cobblestone road, Rackham turned to the other guards and gestured his orders. They huddled around Wayne. I'm guessing they're positioned along those side streets, too. They've covered all their bases. These weren't Grinahay's subordinates. This plan had worked out a route ahead of time, cleared people out, and staked an ambush. None of his pawns could ever pull that off. So who could? Before they could figure out the answer, human silhouettes appeared from all angles, blocking their advance and retreat, plugging up escape routes. We'll cut through. Don't lag behind. Got it. Let's go. With his guards, Wayne unsheathed his sword and raced toward the attackers. There was a chapel near Aunt Godol's mansion. Grinahay had made it at the citizens' request, since he wasn't deeply religious or anything. There he was now, together with the coffin that held his son's corpse. Geralt looked peaceful in death. Grinahay could tell Natra had been respectful in the handling of his body. As he gazed upon his son, he looked the part of a parent wandering aimlessly in life upon the loss of his child. But that was far from the truth. There wasn't an ounce of sadness in his heart. Stupid until the very end, he murmured with disappointment, in a self-deprecating chuckle. No, I shouldn't be surprised. You were my son, after all. He thought back on his earlier conversation with Wayne. It was Grinahay who had been grilled under pressure. He was a Marquis of the Empire, and yet he'd been overtaken by the drive of someone 24 years his junior. Oh, it's all coming back to me. The same thing had happened when meeting with his father, King Antgadol. Just like father, or maybe even greater than him. March into enemy territory, persuade the enemy with eloquence, calmly return home. These would seem the actions of a foolish hero. But Wayne accomplished them. He had all the markings of greatness, just like King Antgadol. Hereafter he would grow into a man of significance and become a driving force in the history of the continent. Grinahay had always wanted that for himself. He'd wanted to become as great as his father, even greater. And yet, when up against that young boy, he was faced with the cold, hard truth. It would never happen. Such a feat was far beyond him. What could he call the feeling rising up in his heart? It wasn't anger or resentment. It wasn't beautiful like a flame nor splendid like water. It was clumsy and plain like a boulder. Now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever praised you even once. Grinahay and Geralt, father and son. The child had lost his life, and the parent wasn't far off from sinking into the sea of history. I know sobbing for you won't cheer you up. Obstinance, yes, that was the name of the feeling. He was about to place an all-or-nothing bet for the first and last time. This was all he could do as a pebble on the wayside. Think of this as an offering. I'll challenge that young hero for you. Grinahay turned on his heel and gave orders. to the servants waiting outside. Gather up any soldiers who can fight. We're capturing the Crown Prince of Natra, and then seizing Princess Loelmina. The shrill sound of swords clashing against each other resounded in the back alley. Wayne and his guards were locked in battle against their assailants. This is bad. Wayne internally clicked his tongue as he assessed the situation. There were 10 attackers. While Wayne had 5 guards, the enemy held the advantage. But his soldiers were elites, handpicked from Natra's top troops. They didn't back down, continuing to hold their ground as they secured the area around Wayne. Were being lured. As they were busy staving off the attackers, they were being driven into the alley. He could tell this was intentional. It won't be long before the townspeople overhear this scuffle and report to the authorities, or the patrols catch on and come running to the scene, which means our enemies won a short, decisive battle, and there must be a trap waiting for us at the end of the alley. Where was it, as he backed up against a wall to prevent any attacks from behind? His eyes did a quick sweep of the area. The back streets were narrow, making a large-scale trap impossible. It had to be a trick that was simple and sudden, one shot to take them down. Oh, snap. In that moment, the wall that Wayne had trusted would protect him was penetrated by a spear from the opposite side, busting right through to stab at him. What? At the very last second, Wayne flipped over to dodge the tip of his spear, which grazed and shredded his overcoat. The assailant who'd bumbled his thrust, Owl, clicked his tongue. He lunged again, but Wayne repelled his attack with his sword. Your Highness. I'm fine. Focus on the enemy in front of you, he urged Rackham, who'd grown increasingly panicked. Wayne never once broke his gaze from the man before him. Managed to escape, huh? Lucky move. Wayne snorted. Did that look like luck to you? This may be our first time meeting, but I think you might need to get your eyes checked. Holy smokes. I can't do that a second time. No way, no how, Wayne thought, forcing himself to keep it together. But his heart was ready to leap out of his chest. They kicked it into high gear when this guy showed up. There's no doubt he's their emotional anchor. If I take him down, the others will go down with him. But... He glanced at Owl, poised with his spear, and knew he'd be a formidable enemy. There were no visible gaps to rush in on, and who knew how long he'd last on defense. Which means, Wayne smiled brazenly, you are the guys who got Marquis Antigold mixed up in the revolt. I should have guessed you wouldn't reply. Then let me take a stab at you. Your real identities. Survivors from the conquered countries in the former alliance. His voice was piercing. Officially, anyway. You're actually spies from the west. Owl thrust his spear. With the flat side of his sword, Wayne knocked it off trajectory with a heavy hit. Pins and needles shot through his hand. I'm guessing you're a persistent bunch if you'd go out of your way to recruit a Marquis in the boonies. But I gotta tell you, you picked the wrong candidate. A stroke of bad luck. That's why your plans fell through, right? Your face is telling me you think you've got a chance at fixing things. But do you really? I bet you've got some other pals in town, but they've got their hands full with something else and can't help out. Am I wrong? For the first time, trepidation flashed across Owl's face. I'll answer for you. Their job is to silence Grinnehay for good by assassinating him. Then they'll erase all proof of the uprising in the mansion. Since the mansion is bustling with activity right now, I'm sure they think they'll have an easy time enacting their little scheme. This boy. Owl shuddered internally. Everything that Wayne had guessed was the truth. The young crown prince had read this every move while he'd been in Natra. However, that was the extent of it. It didn't matter if he was an open book. Their men had already infiltrated the mansion, and Wayne was being held up here, which meant, who said these were my only soldiers? Owl went bug-eyed in disbelief. The mansion of Marquis Ankadol was in a flurry of activity from top to bottom. Soldiers hurried back and forth to carry out their orders, which were occasionally barked out in a raised tone. It was as if a storm was blasting through the mansion. Yet a few people on the sidelines watching, with no concern at all. What's going on? Who knows? I bet the master has come up with another idea. Chatting over a pleasant conversation were lonely maids. Their duties were related to the upkeep of the mansion, and they had no interest or role in partaking in anything beyond that. Right, here you go. Make sure that young'uns get their meal. Right. With With that, a maid headed toward the sick room with a tray of food to where one of Geralt's servants was resting. They had arrived 10 days ago in critical condition. But, she talked to herself as she walked down the hallway. I saw Master Geralt off before his departure, but I don't think that child was among the servants. I would have remembered seeing someone so cute after all. She mumbled, heading toward the sick room. She suddenly saw a human silhouette down the far end of the hallway. But that's where. In the mansion, there were a number of rooms that the servants were never allowed to go near, let alone enter. She had heard they stored treasures and important documents, but she had no way of knowing the details. The important thing was that one of those rooms was at the far end of the hall, where she had seen the shadowy figure. She assumed it was a soldier unfamiliar with the layout of the mansion. Because she was in the middle of delivering a meal, she thought it best to leave it be. But that might sour Master Grinahay's mood, and that meant running the risk that he'd criticize all the servants. It can't be helped. She trotted down the hallway and peeked around the corner. We're not supposed to enter in, she halted mid-sentence. When she turned the corner, she was confronted by two men dressed as soldiers, and they turned around in shock at her calling, and she was just as surprised, for one of the soldiers kneeling in front of the door was trying to pick open the lock. What are you? She shrieked as one yanked her arm, forcibly dragging her into the corner. The tray slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. I told you to keep a close watch. Sorry, I'll take care of it. It was here that she finally realized what was and would be happening to her. These two were thieves, and she was now a witness. She had to call someone, but her decision came much too late. Just then one man's hand clamped over her mouth as the other gripped a dagger. Stop, she writhed and thrashed around, desperately trying to escape, but they'd overpowered her, and she was unable to wiggle out of his grasp. The bare blade drew closer, sliding across her neck end. The dagger that used to be in his hand was sticking out of his head. She didn't understand what was going on. Strangely, the man and girl adopted the same expression before he crumpled on top of her. And while she struggled to process these events, a boy had appeared beside her before she had a chance to notice. She recognized his face. He was the servant who'd come rushing into the mansion a little over a week before. The food. He brought it all this way. Sorry about that. At the same time, she was even more stumped than before. When she'd seen him, he'd had black hair. But the one before her now had hair as white as snow. Don't worry. It'll be over soon, he said curtly. The boy was Nanaki Raleigh. Protect Grinahey. On this day, Wayne had called Nanaki to his office to issue an order. The Flam couldn't hide his confusion. Why do I have to do that? Because I'm almost certain Grinahey will be assassinated, Wayne answered. No bullshit. The culprits are Western spies who drew him into the plan to a revolt. They want to kill him to prevent him from spoiling any scheme any further. I want you to protect Grinahey and make sure he doesn't die. What a pain. Who cares if he dies? Wayne shook his head. We can't have that. If he dies now, it'll be a huge problem. We need him to live so we can get him to confess. Nanaki groaned in dissatisfaction. But Felania is my master. I can't leave her. I understand that. While you're gone, I intend to up her security. Why can't you get anyone else? It has to be you, Wayne asserted. This job requires a master of disguise. Only one person fits that bill, and that's you, Nanaki. The Flam are good at makeup. This was an ancient saying in the Western continent that came about due to their characteristic red eyes and white hair. A persecuted people in the West, the Flam usually had appearances that were dead giveaways of their racial origin. To circumvent this, it's said they began trying to deceive others by changing the color of their eyes and hair. The saying was originally created out of spite to mock them. This tradition became an essential skill to the Flam. Parent passed it on to child, who went on to teach it to their own child. Legend has it that the skill passed on through generations is alive and well throughout the continent. And so, Nanaki made for an excellent choice as a master of this talent. Guess I've got no choice. Okay, how should I sneak in? Through the front door, Wayne said as he took out Geralt's dagger. Bring this with you. Call yourself Geralt's servant and tell them he died. Act as weak as possible. They'll let you rest in the mansion as Grinnehay tightens security around him, jumping at shadows. This way assassins won't be able to waltz right in, which means I don't have to do anything after I get in. Not quite. I plan on arriving shortly after. It'll probably result in a huge uproar. The assassins will take that opportunity to take out Grinnehay and dispose of the evidence, stop them, and secure the proof. You make it sound so easy, isn't it? For you, anyway. Without answering, Nanaki took the dagger and put it in his breast pocket. Before turning on his heel, he asked, "One last thing. Will those help Falanya?" "Of course. Have I ever lied to you?" "Yeah, a bunch of times." Wayne looked away, and Nanaki snorted. "Well, I guess you've never lied when it comes to Falanya." Nanaki left the room. His figure melded into his surroundings, and without anyone noticing, he departed for Ankadol's mansion. Who the hell are you? Which brings us up back to the present. He confronted the assassins. Can't you tell by looking at me? We're in the same business. Nanaki kicked off the ground, aiming for the man. Even though he hadn't recovered from the shock, the man tried to reach for the dagger at his waist, but it was too late. Before his hand could reach its hilt, Nanaki closed in soundlessly, snatching it out of his hands and piercing up through the man's jaw. Gah! The man groaned, clawing at his face to yank the dagger sticking out of him, but he lost all strength and slammed into the floor. Nanaki took a momentary glance at the silent corpse, then turned around. "See? Told you that wouldn't take long. Hey!" When he called out to the girl, he realized she'd fainted before she was able to pull herself from under the corpse that pinned her down. Watching two people get killed right before her eyes had been too traumatic for her. Well, whatever. Saves me time. Now that he'd stopped the assassins, Nanaki had to get evidence of the rebellion next. That meant hiding the bodies and getting a move on. "I wonder if Wayne's at his wit's end right about now, too," Nanaki murmured, as he gathered the unconscious girl to place in a room to rest.